Going through the book of Leviticus, we've seen many different types of uncleanness, and today we're going to be looking at the uncleanness related to leprosy. Leprosy is a very serious disease that is contagious to a certain extent, and as a result of the contagion factor, it results in the isolation of people, and they are unclean, they're unable to interact with other people, and they're separated and segregated from everyone else. So it is quite a terrifying thing to have. It does damage to the nerves, the respiratory tract, skin, eyes, and the nerve damage can lower one's sense of pain or the ability to feel at all. And due to having a lack of the ability to feel anything, people with leprosy tend to get injured a lot on their extremities, and that can lead to a lot of severe injuries over time that don't really heal, and people lose fingers, hands, arms, legs, toes. It's just all around a nasty disease. And of course, you don't have the ability to feel very well, and you have damage to your eyesight as well, so you'd be more prone to running afoul and getting injured. So it is pretty severe. It's my understanding that there's different types of leprosy, and they come from different types of bacteria or the way that the bacteria infects the person. So we might see some of that as well as we go through this section relating to leprosy. Leviticus 13:1, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 13:2, when a man has a swelling on his skin, a scab or a bright spot, and it becomes the disease of leprosy in his skin, then he shall be brought to the priest, to Aaron or one of his sons. Leviticus 13:3, the priest shall look at the disease spot on his skin, and if the hair in it has turned white, and the disease appears depressed and deeper than his skin, it is a leprous disease, and the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. Seeing as leprosy has different variants and different types, it's almost like a category of disease or illness, and as a result of having this, the person would be unclean. And in this instance, the priest is examining someone, and they have these sores on their body. They're white sores, and inside these sores, the hair is bleached white, and the sore is kind of sunken in. So we have a sunken in sore that is white in color, and it has the hair turning white as well. So there's multiple factors in determining whether or not this sore is of leprosy or if it is something else. And if the priest thinks that this is what it is, then the person is unclean, and they are set in that category, and we'll see some more of that later on. Leviticus 13:4, if the bright spot is white on his skin, not depressed, and the hair on it not turned white, the priest shall quarantine the person or bind up the spot for 7 days. 13:5, and the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if the disease in his estimation is at a standstill and has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall quarantine the person or bind up the spot 7 more days. Leviticus 13:6, and the priest shall examine him at the 7th day, and if the disease part has a more normal color, and the disease has not spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only an eruption or a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. 13:7, but if the eruption or scab spreads further in the skin after he has shown himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. 13 and 8. If the priest sees that the eruption or scab is spreading in the skin, then he shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. So we have this priest examining this individual repeatedly throughout several weeks. And then eventually the disease progresses and he sees the eruptions and the scabs, and he has no choice but to proclaim that they are leprous and they need to be segregated. Leviticus 13 and 9. When the disease of leprosy is in a man, he shall be brought to the priest. 13 and 10. And the priest shall examine him, and if there is a white swelling in the flesh, and the hair on it has turned white, and there is quick, raw flesh in the swelling. 13 and 11. It is a chronic leprosy in the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He shall not bind the spot up, for he is unclean. As there are more than one type of leprosy, what we have described here sounds like a late form of leprosy. And maybe this individual, this person that is being examined, didn't have any symptoms of leprosy, but has had it for years, maybe even decades. And the leprosy has been damaging the nervous system, so the person has lost the ability to feel. And we have the description here of raw flesh. So maybe this person lost the ability to feel. They were severely injured. They're clumsy. They don't have nerve feeling, whatever. And they just have gnarly injuries, but they don't even feel them. And the priest, he sees this. He sees the injury, and he sees that the person doesn't seem to really feel what's going on, and just immediately declares that they're leprous. He doesn't need to go through the weeks of quarantine to make sure that it is what it is. He can just kind of tell right away that this is a severe case of leprosy and get the person out of there, quarantined, separated, so it doesn't spread the infection to the rest of the people in the camp. Leviticus 13 and 12. But if supposed leprosy breaks out in the skin, and it covers all the skin of him who has the disease from head to toe, wherever the priest looks. 13 and 13. The priest shall examine him. If the supposed leprosy covers all of his body, he shall be pronounced him clean of the disease. It is all turned white, and he is clean. So we have here the description that the person is so completely covered in sores that all of their flesh has turned white, but they're not raw and exposed. So for whatever reason, they're considered clean in a ceremonial sense. It's quite interesting looking at commentaries on this particular section. They talk about that this is a type of leprosy that is not contagious, and I don't really know enough to really have a good answer to that. Leviticus 13 and 14. But when the raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. 13 and 15. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. For the raw flesh is unclean. It is a leprosy. 13 and 16. But if the raw flesh turns again and becomes white, he shall come to the priest. 13 and 17. And the priest shall examine him, and if the diseased part is turned to white again, then the priest shall pronounce him clean who had the disease. He is clean. So this person is considered clean until there is raw flesh, at which point he becomes unclean. But if that raw flesh becomes white and clean again, well then the person is able to be declared clean again. So this is something interesting. Leviticus 13 and 18. And when there is in the skin of the body the scar of a boil that is healed. 13 and 19. And in the place of the boil there is a white swelling, or a bright spot, reddish white, and it is shown to the priest. 13 and 20. And if when the priest examines it, it looks lower than the skin, and the hair on it is turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy. It has broken out in the boil. 13 and 21. But if the priest examines it and finds no white hair in it, and it is not lower than the skin, but appears darker, then the priest shall bind it up for 7 days. 13 and 22. If it spreads in the skin, he shall pronounce him unclean. It is diseased. 13:23. But if the bright spot does not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. What we have being described here is a system in which the priest can discern whether or not this is leprosy or some other skin condition, some sort of reappearing scar, some sort of ulcer that reappears, a type of boil, whatever it is. Something that is similar to leprosy but is distinct and different from it. And this is just a method that the priest can use to tell whether or not this person has leprosy or not. Leviticus 13:24. Or if there is any flesh in the skin of which there is a burn by fire, and the quick flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or white. 13:25. Then the priest shall examine it, and if the hair in the bright spot is turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out in the burn. Therefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy. 13:26. But if the priest examines it, and there is no white hair in the bright spot, and it is no lower than the rest of the skin, but is darker than, the priest shall bind it up for 7 days. 13:27. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day. If it is spreading in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. 13:28. But if the bright spot has not spread, but is darker, it is a swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar of the burn. So we have the priest examining the skin of an individual, and he needs to determine whether or not that this is leprosy, or if it is simply a burn. Somebody has been wounded by fire or something hot, and there has been burning of the flesh. And we have this method of determining whether or not it is one or the other. We have a quarantine being placed and seeing how things progress and determining from the results whether or not it is or isn't. Leviticus 13:29. When a man or woman has a disease upon the head or in the beard. 13:30. The priest shall examine the diseased place. If it appears to be deeper than the skin, with yellow, thin hair in it, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a mange-like leprosy of the head or beard. 13:31. If the priest examines the spot infected by the mange-like disease, and it does not appear deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, the priest shall bind up the spot for 7 days. 13:32. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the diseased spot. If the mange has not spread, and has no yellow hair in it, and does not look deeper than the skin. 1333. Then the patient shall be shaved, except for the mange-like spot, and the priest shall bind up the spot 7 days more. 1334. On the 7th day the priest shall look at the mange-like spot. If the mange has not spread and looks no deeper than the skin, he shall pronounce the patient clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. 1335. But if the mange-like spot spreads in the skin after his cleansing, 1336. Then the priest shall examine him, and if the mange-like spot is spread in the skin, the priest need not look for yellow hair. The patient is unclean. 1337. But if in his examination the mange is at a standstill and has black hair in it, the mange-like disease is healed. He is clean. The priest shall pronounce him clean. So here we have a system of determining if there is leprosy on the head or beard. So I'm guessing it is the face and everything as well. Instead of being white hairs, we have yellow hairs. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And the procedure is pretty much the same as what we've seen previously. The priest examines the person and sees how things are going, shuts them up for a week, gets them to quarantine, checks them out again, see if it progresses. Well, if it is, if it isn't, well, there you go. Keep going until the priest is satisfied in his conclusion whether or not they do or they don't have leprosy. The difference is that they cut the hair to get a better view of the spot or whatever, and not cutting right over top of it, but shaving the hair in the area so that the priest can get a better visual cue of how things are going. Leviticus 1338. When a man or a woman has on the skin bright spots, even white bright spots. 1339. Then the priest shall look, and if the bright spots in the skin are a dull white, it is a harmless eruption. He is clean. So this is what we would call freckles, determining whether or not freckles are leprosy. Leviticus 1340. If a man's hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. 1341. And if his hair has fallen out from the front of his head, he has baldness of the forehead, but he is clean. 1342. But if there is on the bald head or forehead a reddish white disease spot, it is leprosy breaking out on his baldness. 1343. Then the priest shall examine him, and if the disease swelling is reddish white on his bald head or forehead, like the appearance of leprosy in the skin of the body. 1344. He is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His disease is on his head. So here we have described male baldness. The man has a bald head, or the front of his head is going bald. That is male pattern baldness. That is not leprosy. But if he has the spots, the leprous spots, and the priest examines them and determines that they are leprous spots, well, then the guy has leprosy on top of being bald. Apparently leprosy can cause hair to fall out as well. So there is some properties to that. So Leviticus 1345. And the leper's clothing shall be rent, and the hair of his head shall hang loose, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry, unclean, unclean. 1346. He shall remain unclean as long as the disease is in him. He is unclean. He shall live alone, and his dwelling shall be outside the camp. Being found with leprosy was a very unfortunate event, and as a result, the leper lived in isolation, separated from the people of Israel. They had to live alone. as outsiders, rending their clothes and covering the upper lip. These were signs of mourning. We see when certain individuals die, there is events in which people are rending their clothes. The leper, he is in a state of mourning, a state of sadness, and as a result, he must wear rended clothes on top of covering his upper lip, and he needs to cry out and say that he is unclean to prevent others from coming near him and being infected with his uncleanness, to spread the leprosy to others. A very sad state of living. Leviticus 13:47, the garment also that the disease of leprosy, symbolic of sin, is in, whether a wool or a linen garment. In the first half of this chapter, we have been looking at leprosy of the skin, leprosy of people having different skin ailments and the shapes and types and colors, and whether it's raised or unraised, and what color is the hair, all these different properties to determine whether or not a person has leprosy or not. And if they have it, well, then they are separated from society, and that sucks. But now we are looking at leprosy of clothing. Now, the word leprosy in the Hebrew, or the word that they've used to translate it here, is kind of interesting. I'll use that word. And so this leprosy of clothing is very different than what we saw previously. I've seen some commentators suggest that maybe this was like a mold. People would have clothing and it would get moldy and they would have these spots. And as mold is, it grows and spreads and contaminates. And we know in our modern day of modern science that breathing in the spores of mold and being in contact with mold can be very harmful and cause rashes and things. So one of the interpretations of this section in the book of Leviticus is that this is like clothing that is affected with mold and it needs to either be cleaned or destroyed. And this is the process and the interpretation of how this is done. Another interpretation I saw looked at this as more of contaminated clothes by people who had leprosy. If there was somebody that was living in a house and they had leprosy and they left and they had some of their clothes behind, whether or not those clothes were leprous or not. And some diseases and ailments, they can be caught on clothing and they can be spread that way, like different types of smallpox and stuff, right? So Leviticus 13:48, whether it be in woven or knitted stuff, or in the warp or warp of linen, or of wool, or in the skin, or anything made of skin. 13:49, if the disease is greenish or reddish in the garment, or in a skin, or in the warp or wharf, or in anything made of skin, it is the plague of leprosy. Show it to the priest. 13:50, the priest shall examine the disease article and shut it up for 7 days. 13:51, he shall examine the disease on the 7th day. If it is spread in the garment or in the article, whatever service it may be used for, the disease is a rotting or corroding leprosy. It is unclean. Clothing in this era was very different than in the modern day, and it took a lot of effort to make clothes. It was not something that a machine could just make 1 billion shirts in an hour. It was a very different time than now. So clothing was worth a lot more. So even if it had some of these spots on it, they get the priest to check it out to make sure everything's okay, because they didn't want to part with it, for there was just a tremendous amount of value in clothing. Now all these sections where they talk about the warp and the wharf, that is the stitching on how the clothes themselves are made. I think if you really want to know, you can look up a diagram picture of how cloth is actually made, and it looks kind of interesting. But there's just a tremendous amount of value in clothing here, so people didn't want to just throw things out like we do today. They had a lot of value, and as a result, they want to be very frugal with the cloth and repair what needs to be repaired. And if a section can be removed and the garment can be fixed, well, so be it. Leviticus 13:52, he shall burn the garment, whether diseased in warp or warp, in wool or linen or anything made of skin, for it is a rotting or corroding leprosy, to be burned in the fire. 13:53, but if the priest finds the disease has not spread in the garment, in the warp or the warp, or in anything made of skin. 13:54, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which the plague is, and he shall shut it up for 7 days more. 13:55, and the priest shall examine the disease article after it has been washed, and if the disease portion has not changed color, though the disease has not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it in fire. It is a rotting or corroding disease, which the leprous spot be inside or outside. 13:56, if the priest looks and the diseased portion is less noticeable after it is washed, he shall tear it out of the garment or the skin, leather, or out of the warp or warp. 13:57, if it appears still in the garment, either in the warp or in the warp, or in anything made of skin, it is spreading. You shall burn the diseased part with fire. 13:58, but if the garment or the woven or knitted stuff, or warp or anything made of skin, from which the disease departs when you have washed it, shall then be washed a second time and be clean. 13:59, this is the law for a leprous disease, in a garment of wool or linen, either in the warp or warp, or in anything made of skin, to pronounce it clean or unclean. So here we have the clothing. The priest is testing it to see whether or not the infection of the clothing is spreading. And we have different solutions. It's like, well, wash it, check it again, see if it's spreading still. Remove the section that is bad. Burn the whole garment. Different solutions for different problems depending on the severity of the symptoms of leprosy that the clothing